Let's make sure this puppy's on. And I'm not logged in. I am pretty sure we are live. All right, you ready?
Ready.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a beautiful Monday morning. Today we have a special episode of, I'm not really sure what we're going to talk about or where this is going to leave us, but today I am talking with none other than the infamous or famous or bearded person, David Neal. David, how are you, sir?
I am doing well. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you. This has been a long time coming. I am a personal fan of you, so I am looking forward to this conversation. Before we get started, why don't you do a quick introduction of who you are, what you do, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Well, I'm David Neal. I go by Reverend Geek on Twitter and most other social media, GitHub and whatnot. I'm known for an affection for bacon. For some reason, people seem to associate bacon with me, and I do really like to eat bacon. I mean, it's pretty
fantastic.
awesome.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I'm a software developer for a long time, mostly web development, and then in recent years, I've been doing a lot of speaking at conferences. I started drawing and doing hand-drawn illustrations for my slides, which turned into a bit of a hobby and even a little bit of a side income. And so I really enjoy doing illustrations as well.
Yeah, and speaking of illustrations, I mean, I've been a fan of you and your work now for some time, and you've been to that conference before, and in watching you kind of go through your drawing career. Before we even start talking about that, the sketch note behind you on the wall, is that something that you drew?
No, those aren't mine. That's so that is Melinda Walker,
Okay.
one squiggly line. I've had the privilege of her drawing, doing sketch notes of a couple of my talks now, and I'm a huge fan of her work. And I've been dabbling, doing some of that myself, and so that's an opportunity that I have this year. Is a conference has invited me to do sketch notes for their conference, and so I'm a little anxious. I've been practicing at some of the conferences that I've been to, and really looking forward to that opportunity.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of sketch notes. In fact, a local guy, a guy who lives in Milwaukee by the name of Mike Rode, who wrote a number of books on sketchnoting. I think it's some of the coolest stuff. I've tried, I suck, but I don't know. I should just keep trying.
Yeah.
So I want to come back to the drawing thing, because I think there's a big kind of relationship between people's musical and art careers, hobbies, versus the development side of things. And you and I are both fans of JavaScript and Node and everything of the like. So let's talk about your web development JavaScript thing. And I would encourage everybody who's watching today to kind of follow you on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, because you got a lot of good solid humor that comes out around the likes.
Yeah. So I started with Pascal and Basic a long time ago, and my first computer was a TRS-80, and started learning the basic language on that. Sometime around 95, 96, I was doing a lot of Visual Basic at that time, and got introduced to classic ASP. So I started doing web development then, and somewhere around right around 2000, 99, end of 99, I had done quite a bit of classic ASP apps, And I was at the Microsoft PDC in 2000 when .NET was announced. It was around that time that I was thinking about going to Java. And I was doing some, cross-browser type stuff, DHTML,
Oh yeah.
JavaScript on IE4 and Netscape 4, and JavaScript was just a terrible mess back then. Even you think JavaScript may be bad today, man. Back then it was horrible. And so .NET was announced at the PDC. They gave a book called Presenting C#. Being the nerd that I am, I went back to the hotel room that night and I read it cover to cover, and I said, "Yes, this is awesome. This is what I want to do." And first project in 2001, I think, on .NET, and .NET paid the bills for a long time, but I still focused on building ASP.NET, web apps and things like that. And then about 5 years ago, Node.js caught my eye early on, but for me, the deal breaker was usually database support. I didn't want to use. Yeah. I wanted to use SQL Server. That's been my bread and butter for, since Sybase on NetWare. That's my relational database of choice, and I just, I'm so invested in it. I really like it. So for a long time, Node and SQL Server didn't go together.
Yeah.
And when that finally did happen, and there was at least basic support, that's when I made my jump to Node.js, and I've been I've had this love-hate relationship with JavaScript all these years, and now it's more love than it is hate. I think it's really awesome. I think it's a flexible, and has a lot of advantages, but it's an easy target for humor. So that's why you see a lot of my cartoons and illustrations and stuff poke fun at JavaScript. I feel like people ask me, well, do you really hate JavaScript? And it's like, no, I don't hate it. I think it's pretty awesome. But I feel qualified to make fun of it. Yeah. It's like I wouldn't want to make fun of somebody else's language. I'm not qualified to make fun of Erlang, because right. I know nothing about Erlang, and I would offend someone, if I tried to poke fun at their language.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a moment, I don't know how many years ago, where I kind of just stopped resisting JavaScript and ended up finding it in a whole new light and love for it, and have never really looked back ever since. I mean, I made my bread and butter on C# and ASP.NET, and around the early Node days, ended up getting, I don't want to say converted, but it just became the full-time thing, and I've never really... I've enjoyed it. I enjoy learning something about it every day, and the creativity. I think it's pushed me in a way that I would have never anticipated.
Yeah. And then I came up with a need to build some desktop applications a couple of years ago, and started using Electron, which is Node and Chrome bundled together. And that's been a really awesome bit of technology to play with. And I think it's super cool being able to create. As a web developer, I know nothing about building desktop apps.
Sure.
So using that technology to build really good looking desktop apps that run on Mac and Linux and Windows, that's an awesome bit of technology.
Yeah, so let's explain it some more, because I don't know that everybody necessarily knows what Electron is. I mean, what does development in Electron look like?
Yeah, so Electron, if you've used like the Slack desktop client or Visual Studio Code, those are Electron applications, and they are essentially web apps that run as Node and Chrome is what renders. So if you are a web developer and you know HTML and JavaScript, CSS, that kind of thing, then you're a prime candidate to work on an Electron application. So Electron, in a nutshell, is a Node application. It starts its life cycle as a Node process, and then from that say, an index.js file where you're kind of bootstrapping the application, it can then launch one or more windows or browser windows for, makes it easier to talk about if you just consider it as a browser.
Sure.
But it launches a window that you can render HTML and whatever. You can use whatever front end technology you want. It can be just plain HTML and JavaScript. You can use jQuery. You can use Angular, React. There's no Vue. There's no limitation on what you can use to build your front end. So your front end, is the key takeaway for an Electron application is that your HTML that's running in the window, the browser, it is not sandboxed. So anything you can do with Node, you can do directly in your HTML JavaScript. So if you want to access the file system, if you want to, open a socket, if you want to, communicate with SQL Server, if you want to communicate with some other backend, database, you can communicate directly from the, essentially the browser window without having to go through like an API layer.
So the routes then, so if I take a Node app and I'm using Express and I've got a bunch of routes that I'm slinging out there, what's the relationship from the Electron shell pinging those routes?
Yeah, so you don't need it. You don't need routes. You don't need a web server. You can make direct, instead of calling like an API layer where you're like calling an Express server, you're sending messages like RPC. Okay. It's like a pub subscribe model where you can say I'm going to send this message to the main thread. The main thread can then do whatever. It can show a print dialog. It can show other types of file and save dialogues. It can do background work, whatever, and then send a message back to the browser client to say I did this work.
Interesting. Yeah, it's been on my list of things to kind of look at and dive into, and I just haven't had a chance to do it. But the fact that you can kind of, I don't know, as a web developer, you can use all of those skills and slam them into Electron is pretty. I don't know. It's pretty cool. Although I would say there's times where I want to punch the Slack client in the throat.
Right.
But VS Code works actually pretty damn well. I mean, you kind of forget that it's an Electron app. Yeah,
it works really well. And of course, Electron was created originally for Atom, the editor that GitHub created, and they spun it off so that other applications could take advantage of it. It can be a little heavy at times. The application itself can be a little large, bundling the Chromium V8 JavaScript engine and Node all together. It kind of makes for a large application, but it solves a lot of problems. I mean, it solves a lot of the headaches if you were to try to build a cross-platform desktop app.
So do you have to, and speaking of bundling, is there a certain bundling type thing, or can you use a Webpack type? I mean, I'm guessing you can use Webpack inside of
You can. But... Yeah, you can use Webpack. But the nice thing is you're running the latest version of Node and the latest version of Chrome independent of whatever is installed on someone's computer. And so what you're targeting is the latest features of JavaScript and, everything. So you don't have to use Babel or Webpack or some of these things unless you really want to, because it's all local files. It's all, you don't have to target Firefox. It's all you have total control over your environment, and you can use the latest JavaScript language features that you want.
Yeah, it's all your sandbox. How does updating work then? Reach out to your server and grab new stuff?
Yeah, so they have a number of mechanisms, and there's also lots of modules available that make it even easier, where you can basically point your application at a repo or point it to some server on your side that's checking is there an update available? And they have built into Electron the ability to, like when you're running Visual Studio Code, you'll see a message pop up that says, an update's available. Do you want to restart?
Sure. Yep.
That's essentially available to any Electron application. When you provide that endpoint, the facility to go and look for update versions, it has the ability to download and just send a notification to say, however you want to notify the user that they can restart and apply that update.
Interesting. Yeah, like I said, it's something that I've long wanted to look at, and I just have never gotten around to doing it. Before I get into the art side of things, let's talk favorite tools in JavaScript Node land. What do you get excited about?
Let's see. Well, I first of all, I love that the new versions of Node, and you have access to all the JavaScript language features. So all the new stuff in Node, especially async and await, I think it's awesome. Yeah. So I'm whatever I can build where I can use the latest version of Node, I'm excited about, because then I don't have to use Babel. I don't have to use any other tools. I can just build, native promises, native async and await.
Yeah.
When I'm building web apps, my tool of choice is Happy.
Another Happy person. Yeah, I've been using it for a long time.
I love it. A good friend of mine, Wyatt Priul, used to be on the Walmart team when they were all developing Happy together. Yeah. And so he's a good friend of mine. He, turned me on to Happy and encouraged me to dive into it. And that's what I've been using for the past couple of years. I think it's pretty awesome. Yep. It's a little more opinionated than Express, but I think they are good opinions. I think there's some good, boundaries that it has that help you to make better Node applications. We've talked about Electron, and a lot of times I find myself just building command line applications, utilities that automate something, or utilities that DevOps may use, or utilities that our support team may use just to automate some things. And so I use Yargs for argument parsing. I heard that one. Okay. It's a really good argument, command line argument parser. And if I want to take it another step further, there's an application or a module called NEXE, like the letter N, EXE, and it can compile Node.js command line application into a standalone executable.
Oh, no kidding.
So you can, if you're building a utility for a customer or something that they're going to run from the command line or schedule every day or every hour, then you can turn it into a standalone app that they can run on Windows or Mac or Linux.
Interesting. There are certainly two things I'll check out.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on the whole Angular React Vue debate?
Well, I've never really. I've done so little front end development in the last in recent years that I've kind of stayed out of that debate. My preference, based on all the things that I know about those frameworks, is React. I like the opinions of the more functional style, the unit, one direction data flow. There's just some good patterns there in React that I really like. I have seen a couple of intro talks on Vue, and they have looked really, really interesting. So I think if I were to do a small web app today and I was going to do front end stuff, I would probably choose Vue just to see what it was like, just to learn it. But React kind of is my favored front end choice.
Yeah, I think it's all exciting. We started talking about classic ASP and all that, and you think of the world then versus what it is now. I mean, the world is so much better. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, it's fantastic
Yeah.
advancements in development of web pages.
Yeah. And like so many other developers in those early days, I too created quite a few frameworks, like I created two or three different frameworks in classic
Oh
ASP
yeah,
for doing like CMS type stuff. And then, same thing when, in ASP.NET, I created my own, almost like MVC before MVC,
sure.
came out. I did content management systems and portals, and jQuery certainly changed a lot
Oh
of
yeah,
things when it came out.
yep, yep. But those days of trying to wire up that JavaScript to those pages, man, they were rough days. That's for
It
sure.
was, yeah.
Not like today. All right, let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about the art side of you,
Okay.
because that's certainly something that fills your Instagram account. It's made its way around the internet. How did that start?
Well, um, its origins are in public speaking. So I started speaking at user groups and conferences about 7 years ago, and when I started, I was terrible. Just like I was a terrible speaker, but I had folks who were really awesome who encouraged me and you know um, helped give me advice and helped me get better at doing it. And I found that I really love doing it, and I really love the opportunity of um, inspiring someone to go and use some new technology
Sure,
or
sure.
try something new, and to get that feedback, say a month or a year later, to say, hey, I went and did that thing you talked about, and
Yep.
here's what I did. And to see the effects of in long term effects of that is really special, and has kept me doing it. But about 4 years ago, maybe four now, I felt like I was just in this rut. Sure, I wanted to get better and better, but I was feeling a little bit burned out about it. Felt like I was just hitting a wall. That sure, I was getting good feedback from my talks. People thought I was a good speaker, but I just wasn't having the impact that I really wanted to have on an
Sure,
audience.
sure.
And as I was doing my research to figure out what can I do? What can I do to make this better? I came across this guy named Dan Rome, Roam, and he's got a video on YouTube called Show and Tell. If you search Dan Rome Show and Tell, you'll find this talk that he gave at Google on the power of hand-drawn illustrations.
Okay.
And I watched this video, and I was just floored. I was like, I work for the last 5 years. I've worked for this company that does Kanban
Hmm.
software, and so we talk a lot about the power of visualization, how powerful a metaphor it is to visualize work,
Yep.
and that when we see work visually, or we see things visually, it says so much more than what we could do if we wrote it out or we talked about it. And so this guy plays on the power of visualization when it comes to giving a presentation. So I saw his video and I watched it like 4 or 5 back to back. I was like, "This is it. This is what I want to do." And I had a brand new talk coming up in Orlando, and I had at the time this iPad Air and a cheap $5 stylus, and I said, I'm gonna draw some stick figures, and I'm gonna try,
Yeah.
see. And I found that I just had so much fun doing it, and I just wanted to keep on doing it. up until like the night before I was giving my talk, I was still drawing slides. I found I couldn't stop. So I give this talk, and it was like a light switch. It was like such a huge difference from any other talk I'd given. The audience was far more engaged. I had so many people that came up to me after the talk and gave me feedback. I had one guy who, I saw this guy running across the parking lot, and I'm like, what's going on with him? You know, and I was like, oh no, he's running to me. And, you know, kind of freaked me out a little bit, but he ran up to me and he says, I wanted you to know that your talk today was the best talk that I went to, and I loved what you did with your slides. I want to be able to do that too. And, you know, he almost brought me to tears. I mean, he was like, I was just so blown away by his feedback. I was like, man, I am really on to something here, and I'm going to keep on doing it. And of course, you know, it became more than just, you know, I found that I just enjoyed doing it so much that sure. I kept on doing it and started pushing myself to get better and to I would challenge myself to draw almost every day, you know, and come up with something silly to post on Twitter and Instagram, and yeah, so that's you know, kind of what I'm known for now. When you come to one of my talks, you're going to see, you know, the majority of my slides are hand drawn.
So how much time per day do you spend drawing?
It really depends. I haven't drawn anything today. I haven't drawn a whole lot this week. But there are times when I try to draw some, you know, at least some kind of little doodle, every day. And I did avatars for people, yeah. You know, for Twitter and social media. And so I just on a whim, I put out this post, back before Christmas saying, you know, $25 special, you know, I'll draw your avatar for $25. Oh my gosh. I could not believe the response from that. I was drawing avatars. I didn't get through the end of my queue until well into January, almost the end of January.
Wow.
It took me a long time, and that really helped me to improve my skills drawing people. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I bet. So how I mean, it was a new thing for you. Like anything that anybody tries new, I mean, we historically suck at it and should admit that we suck in the beginning.
Absolutely.
How long did it take before you really felt confident in like, hey, I can actually do this?
Well, being the eternal optimist, I felt pretty confident early on. I mean, even with my crappy stick figure drawings, I felt like I was able to express far more than I could by going and finding clip art or stock photos or something like that. So I felt pretty good about what I was drawing, even though by, you know, artistic standards, it was really, really crude, just lines and stick figures and whatnot. But I have, just like when you're learning to program or learning to do any new skill, you hit these kind of mile markers where you look back over the, you know, what you did 6 months ago, and you
sure.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe how far I've progressed in the last 6 months, or, you know, oh, that was, you know, now I look at something I drew 6 months ago and think, oh, well, that's terrible. You know, why did I do that?
And I published that online.
And I put it online. So yeah. And I think if people who have been following me over the last several years, they've seen me progress from drawing these, you know, terrible drawings to what I'm able to do today. And I know that, you know, there there are people out there who are real artists, real, quote unquote, real artists who can do way more than I can, but I'm really happy with what I'm able to do.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I love watching your Instagram feed, and you had said something, I don't know when it was, weeks ago, months ago, and comparing or showing stuff that you have done in the past, and I was like, I had forgot. I always think of you drawing as what you are today. I had forgotten about some of the early stuff, and was like, oh, you really have improved. Like, I just always, hey, look, it's awesome, and it's just continually gotten more awesome.
Yeah.
Without...
Yeah, and so I've seen how I've progressed over the last 3 years, and it's really emphasized for me again the fact that I believe anybody can do whatever it is that they want to do.
Yeah.
Whether it's drawing, whether it's some musical instrument, whether it's whatever new hobby or new skill that you want to develop, it's gonna be terrible at first. But if you stick to it and you practice every day or however often that you can accomplish way more than you think you can.
Yeah, totally.
I may never be the best artist, but I am really happy with what I'm able to do, and I get a lot of enjoyment out of it.
Yeah. So, I mean, everybody loves to get into gear. Like, what are you using to do this?
Today I use an iPad Pro and an Apple Pencil. I got one about a year ago, and it was one of those, definitely upped my game as far as the ability to create these drawings. It's so much more precise. It's got the palm rejection and all that kind of stuff, so it's a more natural drawing experience. And I use on the iPad, my primary application is Sketches Pro, which is I think usually $5 or $10 in the App Store. So, typical of Apple stuff, you spend a lot to get the hardware, but once you're in the ecosystem, the apps are really cheap.
Yeah, is that the one by Adobe, or is that
No, Adobe has 2 or 3. There's one of theirs that I use a lot. It's called Adobe Draw.
Okay.
And I use that for when I'm doing caricatures, that's usually the app that I do the line art in first. And then I'll take the caricature or just the black and white line drawing and import that into Sketches Pro and finish it.
Why that workflow?
Because the ink pen that's in Adobe is really awesome. It has just a great taper at both ends. It looks really good, but the rest of the drawing features in that application are not that great. Compared, but
relative
with
to
what
the rest of the stuff, yeah.
Relative to the application that I like to use. Now, there's an application that a lot of professional illustrators use on iPad called Procreate, and it's about $20, and it can do amazing stuff. You can create really, really professional illustrations and artwork in that application, but it's way more complicated. It's got way more tools and features, and for me, it's overkill for the kind of things that I draw. Sure. Like if I'm going to draw a slide for one of my talks, I do it all in Sketches Pro, and then import it onto the Mac and put it into PowerPoint.
So, the $1 million question, of course, is: have you ever drawn with pencil and paper?
When I was a kid, I did, and in the last year, I've tried to do some sketch notes at conferences. Sure. Like I want to learn how to do that. I'm really impressed by people who do that well, and so I bought this little sketchbook and some Sharpies and different ink pens to play with, and it's it's hard, because I've gotten so used to using an iPad where I can, 2-finger tap or 2-finger swipe to undo something and redo it. And then when I'm on this physical piece of paper, it's like, oh, I want to erase that, and I can't erase it. And, it's like I'm spoiled by the digital technology.
Which begs the question, like, why not just try to do this sketchnoting on the iPad?
Well, that's what I've decided I'm going to keep trying to do. The last conference I went to, I did 3 or 4 sketch notes using the iPad, and they turned out way better than drawing on a piece of paper. So there's a conference that I've been talking to who has invited me to do sketch notes for some of their talks, and which has got me like really nervous. I'm like, I don't know. I hope I can pull this off, but what I have proposed to them, what I hope will work out, is I would like to see one of those big Surface Studios.
Oh.
And I would like to try doing sketch notes on a Surface Studio. And the idea I've pitched to them is someone can watch me do those sketch notes while someone's giving a presentation. So either project what I'm doing onto another screen while I'm drawing it, or stream it so that you give the audience a URL. If they want to watch it while the talk is happening, they can watch me draw.
Boy, that's really putting the heat on yourself, isn't
it? Yeah, but I think I'd be much more comfortable doing it, digitally than doing it on like a big whiteboard or easel.
Yeah. I've watched a few. I was turned on to sketchnoting a long time ago. I had seen it at South by Southwest. Was watching somebody do it during one of the talks, and I was just like, my mind just exploded. And then I met Mike Rhodes in Milwaukee, and we have had him up a few times at that conference to kind of teach, the art of doing sketchnoting, just in your own meetings and the things that you do, and kind of logically laying out, information. So I just love that stuff. I think it's fantastic. In fact, I'm sitting here looking at, a whole stack full of, art pens and whatnot.
Yeah.
So it's good stuff. All right, before we wrap up here, 2 things. One, I just want to thank you from all of us to you for everything that you've done in the community, for who you are, kind of what you stand for. I can't think of, people out there who just genuinely make other people feel well and invited to the thing that they're doing. And so,
thank you.
Me and everybody else, I just keep doing you, because I think it's freaking fantastic. So
awesome. So I end every one of my talks with a slide that says, "You don't need permission to be awesome." And I feel like it's my personal mission, part of my goal, mission in life is to encourage other geeks, professionals or not, software developers or not, people, that come to these conferences, whether aspiring to be developers or aspiring to be, in technology. I want to inspire people to go and do awesome things. And that's my goal. And I'm glad to hear feedback that I'm having an impact.
You absolutely are. And it's funny that you brought that up, because my last question for you today was, when I had asked you originally what you were most passionate about, you had said making developers awesome. And so with that being said, what would be 1 or 2 things that people can do to go be awesome?
Well, I've been doing a lot of reading about emotional intelligence. I've been doing a lot of reading about leadership, and one of the things that I've come to terms with over the years is on being a leader, and leadership is not it's not the same as being a manager.
That's right.
Like I I really resisted being a manager for a long time because I didn't want to go down that path.
Yep.
But what I've come to realize is that you can do things that inspire other people, and you can do things that are just being a decent human, being a person who other people want to be associated with or want to have, a relationship with. And I believe that every person has an incredible opportunity to impact their family, their community, the people that they work with
Yep.
in positive ways. That if we just take a little bit of time to look at it, look within ourselves, and to learn about how we can be more of an encouragement and be more excellent to each other.
Amen to that, brother. I completely agree. So with that, thank you for being on another version of Ask That. And where can people find more about you?
Yep, Reverent Geek. Search for, find me on Twitter, Reverent Geek, reverentgeek.com. Medium. I post a lot of my blog posts on Medium under Reverent Geek as well.
All right. Well, sir, thank you, and enjoy the rest of your week. I look forward to seeing some drawings.
All right. Thanks.
All right.